Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. We're getting some more work done here on the WRX. If you're not subscribed to the channel, then what we've been doing is over the winter, I went ahead and replaced out a whole bunch of the suspension components. And the last big thing on the list of things that need to get done here before I can drive this is we need to get an alignment done. And so if you don't follow the channel, or if the name of the channel didn't give it away, I'm big on doing things myself whenever I can. And so one thing I picked up that I'm actually really excited to go ahead and use, this is a DIY kit for doing an alignment on your car. Comes with all the components that you need to go ahead and set up an alignment kit that should, from everything that I've seen, again, I haven't set it up yet, I haven't used it, but this should give us really, really good results without having to spend a ton of money. But I'll get more into the kit in a minute. The first thing that I want to do is get this up in the air so I can show you the suspension points that I'm going to be loosening up, just hand tight, lowering the car back down, and then I'm going to be torquing those to spec. A lot of them I just torqued to spec while it was in the air on the off chance that I forgot. At least then I would have tight suspension points. But ideally, anytime you have a suspension point that will move under load, you want to make sure you drop the car down and then torque them while the suspension's under load. So let me get this up in the air, that way I can point out all those suspension points. Then off camera, because it's kind of boring work, I'll go ahead and lower this down, get everything that I want torqued to spec, and then we can go ahead and get setting this kit up. All right, so here in the front end, I'll be loosening up this bushing here on the front control arms. I think I'm going to go ahead and loosen the end links too. I'm not 100% sure if those are going to matter or not, but I'll loosen those up anyway. Another one that I'm not 100% sure how much it's going to matter is these rearward bushings on the control arm, but because this control arm does sort of move like that inside the bushing, I will go ahead and loosen these up. If you watched the video where I went ahead and installed these control arms, you'll remember that I had mentioned that you want to go ahead and tighten these up before you install them because you can't get a torque wrench in there. I did notice, I saw on Amazon, they do sell torque wrenches that have interchangeable heads, and one of those interchangeable heads is a crescent wrench. So I'm probably going to go ahead and pick one of those up. For today, I'm just going to go ahead and hand tight to a point that I'm confident that it's tightened up enough, and then in the future I'll come through with a torque wrench just to verify that I have the proper tension on there. But that's about it for the front end. And then in the rear end here for our trailing arms, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to loosen up the rearward bushing, the forward bushing, and then pretty much all of the connection points for the lateral links back here. Those are all going to get loosened up, and then I'll set the car down and torque those to spec. And I'll just throw it in here because the next time I come back, the car is going to be back down. One thing that I built a while ago are these wooden risers to set the car down on, because when we do the alignment, all the adjustments, we want to do them with the car at ride height. And so this gives me enough room to set the car down, but then still be able to get underneath the car with a creeper, make my alignment adjustments with the suspension under full load. And then also the other thing I'm going to do is we want to make sure that the wheels will be able to move as we make our suspension adjustments. We don't want the tire sticking to these and essentially the tire kind of deforming, but the wheel staying in place. So I'm just going to throw some sandy dirt down on here. I didn't go and buy like sand or anything, but I've got some good dry dirt in the back half of the barn. I think it's going to work perfectly fine without having to buy an actual bag of sand or something from the store. But we'll throw that down on the tops of these. That way when we make our alignment adjustments, there won't be as much friction and the wheel will want to freely move, and we can see those little adjustments we're making in the alignment. So let me go ahead and get all of these suspension points adjusted, set the car down, tighten up, and then I'll come back to you. All right guys, so today's just not my day apparently. I went to go ahead and make sure that the suspension was aired up to a ride height that I wanted. And the first problem I ran into was my controller wasn't responding like to anything at all. I did a quick Google search and people said apparently there's some faults that happen with these remotes. I won't bother doing it right now, but I took the two screws out of the back, and when I took the keypad out, the little electrical connector that it sits in, completely, the solder connections had completely separated from the board. So that was my issue with that. I then went ahead and I used the app on my phone, which now I can't get to connect. I don't know, I think it actually has to connect to that controller. I tried plugging the controller back in because it will turn on, it's just the buttons don't work. But I can't get it to connect to try to do a recalibration, because when I did finally get it to work the first time in the app, for some reason, all of a sudden the second port in here, the automatic purge valve that the manifold uses to dump air out of the bags when you want it to, is stuck open. And I don't know if that's a mechanical problem or if something that a recalibration on the manifold will help. But if I can't get the app to connect to the system on my phone, I'm pretty much screwed until I get a new remote. I was just gonna jump on the internet and try to get one of these remotes. I didn't think they would be very expensive. They're like $300 to $400 for one of these. Apparently, if I can show proof of purchase from what I saw on the internet as far as the issue with the remote, Airlift is good about going ahead and replacing those. So I'll have to contact them. But I can't do the alignment without the suspension set at the proper ride height. So I did have some other things I wanted to do today, not in the car, just around the house. But I do have a couple hours left here that I had planned for doing the alignment. So I think instead of wasting this time and just quitting, I'm gonna go ahead and get the alignment kit at least put together and set up. And then once I figure everything out with the Airlift and we can get this thing at the proper ride height, we will go ahead and finish the alignment. All right, so this is the kit that I bought from Caliper Garage. They have two different versions, one that's real basic and one where you get some extra stuff. I went with the extra stuff. You get a stainless steel ruler for measuring off of your measurement points on the wheels to your strings when you get everything set up. You get a QR code to get your instructions, a couple stickers. You've got your string that you're gonna run down the sides of the car. Little thumb nuts to tighten your various connection points down. You get a whole bag of these little orange connectors. I'll open these in a second. They're basically little 3D printed connectors. You've got these foam bits to protect against the vehicle's body, because you're basically going to be putting a frame together to run your string box. And then some little plumb weights here to keep tension on the strings. And then the only thing that you have to purchase on your end is some 1/2-inch conduit, which I ran to the store the other day and I got some. I already had one piece over there and I think it said 3 to 4. I did buy 4 pieces. I will end up using that. I've got some things left out here in the shop that I need to wire up, so I will end up using that, so I didn't mind buying a little bit more than I might need. And here's a better look at the little 3D printed connector pieces that we're gonna use to put this kit together. Now this kit runs about, if I remember, it was about 70 bucks for this kit. And essentially it's gonna put together the same sort of kit that if you were to buy pre-made from a lot of companies. I was looking like on the low end, around $400, and then kind of the sky's the limit depending on what you want to spend on this style of kit, all the way up to like over $1,000 if you wanted to spend it. So I'm pretty intrigued to see how well this goes together, because for $70, some supplies you got to buy on your own and just a little bit of time putting the kit together, I think that's a phenomenal deal. So let's go ahead and start getting this knocked out and set up. right, so that's about as much work as I'm gonna get done today, but you can see that we got the structures on there. I haven't gone ahead and like centered them absolutely perfectly yet, just kind of eyeballed them. But you can see like in the trunk, the little hooks here, they do a good job. There really isn't like a lip here, but they still do a really good job of just kind of holding into the fabric here, the plasticky fabric for the trunk lining. And then it rests with the foam padding on the bumper. And then you've got your cross tube, which you'll hang your strings from. And then it's the same story in the front. Just hooked it underneath the radiator support here. I was gonna go off of the top of the radiator shroud, but that would have put me, I think, a little bit too centered on the front. So I just did it so that it moved them out a little bit. It does come with 2 more of these foam things, but I don't have anything touching here with the center rod, so I didn't have to worry about that. Just the 2 that go on the front bumper. You can see just from there to there, this one needs just a little bit more adjusting, but there's no sense in really going too much further. I might need to find a way to get the WRX off the lift, depending on how long it's gonna take airlift to get me a new controller. There's no sense in really going too into detail on what we're gonna be doing, because you'll see it when we get around to doing the alignment, which should be right after this cut. All right, and we're back, ready to go ahead and get this alignment done. As bad as I want to get this car on the road, like I've been dying to get it out there, I just want to drive it already. I am losing a little bit of motivation to get this alignment done, the last few little things it needs to get on the road. So this video, at least the remainder of this video, is probably going to be a little bit more quick and dirty. I'm going to try to show you guys everything, not leave anything out, but at the same time, I just want to get everything finished up here today. So if the video seems maybe like a little bit rushed, that's why. But let me go ahead and get you caught up on the couple little things that have happened in the meantime. So like I said in the last video, the reason we couldn't move forward was the airlift controller malfunctioned. I did finally get the warranty controller in. There was a little bit of a hiccup with that, just in the shipping. It really wasn't too big of an issue. I ended up warrantying it through Bag Riders. There was just some confusion in the shipping department. They thought they shipped it out, didn't ship it out. The cool part was once I contacted them and was just kind of wondering where it was, they overnighted it to me, which couldn't have been very cheap. So big shout out to Bag Riders for, correcting that problem and overnighting that new controller to me. I didn't go back and look at the footage, so I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last video, if it popped up after I had run into the issue with the controller, but I also ran into an issue with the airlift manifold. Basically the little tiny purge valve right here above the line that goes to the front driver's side bag. After it would air up, something was stuck in there and it would just continue to leak air out of there. So they also warranted the manifold for me. The only issue I ran into with that is the 90-degree fittings that I use to kind of keep those lines nice and tidy and cleaned up in the rear end. They're kind of a one-time use. You can see there on the end that actually plugs into the manifold. Once that PTC fitting in there kind of grabs hold, it leaves those little gouges in the plastic, and then it leaves a couple more when you remove it. So they're kind of one-time use. If you go to reuse these, you do get some leaking air. Luckily, I had plenty of these on hand. I ordered more supplies than I needed for putting this air ride system together, just so I wouldn't run into any delays. So I had extras of these, so that wasn't too big of a deal. The only one that I can confirm is still leaking is it's a very small leak from the tank supply out of the manifold, and I was able to confirm that. Soapy water really wasn't identifying the problem very well, but since I've got the new manifold in and the air controller in, this is sat now for about a week. I just came out and turned the system back on, and all 4 bags were exactly like before. I know there's a tiny leak on the front passenger side at the push to connect fitting. That was present last year too, so that was about 3 or 4 psi lower than where I left it. The other bags were all either dead on or within like 1 psi. The tank, however, had dropped to about half. So at some point I do need to get in there and just remedy that little bit of leak. It's actually not where the 90-degree fitting goes into the manifold. It's where the line's actually going into the PTC on the 90-degree fitting. Either way, I can worry about that later. Everything's good enough now to get this alignment going. And real quick, the only other thing that I did is went ahead and got the new lug nuts I was talking about getting on there. I ended up grabbing these Muteki lug nuts, and I think they sit in there real nice, and they look way better than those extended lug nuts that I had bought before. And then last week, like I had mentioned when I was getting those new warranted parts in there, I kind of fiddled with the suspension. It's not on the ground, so I can't really get an idea of how actually like low the car is. But for me, lowering car is not really about how close it gets to the ground. It's just about cleaning up the wheel gap. That's what I don't like with cars, and why I lower them is just to clean up that wheel gap. So right now, the way I've got it set, I think this is going to be pretty good for drivability. But as long as we're close, and this should be very, very close to where it's drivable, I should be able to set the alignment up, and then if we have to adjust the ride height a little bit later on because maybe it's a little too low and it's not quite drivable, at least very pleasant to drive in that ride height, we can lift it up a little bit. Or maybe if it's perfectly fine, there's no issues, whatever, maybe we can drop it down a little bit. As long as we're, close in the ballpark with where we want the ride height, I should be able to set the alignment up now, and it really won't be too big of a deal if we just change the ride height a very little bit. All right, and it's future me interrupting here real quick. One thing that I completely forgot to mention, and I also completely forgot to do when I did the alignment, is make sure that the steering wheel was completely centered. It was kind of that transitioning period between having the alignment partially set up and having to wait a couple weeks to get parts in, and I had lifted the car up and set it down a couple times. I completely forgot to make sure that the steering wheel was centered. So you need to make sure that your steering wheel is completely centered. A lot of people will take some sort of device or a ratchet strap and actually like rigidly connect it. But I didn't do that. You can't quite tell from this angle. I have the wheels perfectly straight in the front right now, and it is tilted to the right ever so slightly. Nothing that really bugs me, but this winter I'll probably just go ahead and get this alignment setup set back up when I've got some free time, and then just readjust the front to get the wheels straight, but then align the wheels back straight to the wheel. But it's no big deal in the meantime. I've been driving this thing and it's perfectly fine. It's just kind of, my OCD bothers me a little bit that it's just ever so slightly canted to the right. I did get lucky though that it wasn't more right or left, because I completely forgot to check and make sure that it was straight. So let's go ahead and get back to the alignment. So one thing that is really cool about this kit that's supplied by Caliper Garage is not only do they supply the materials to make the frame, the instructions to put the frame together, but then they also provide instructions on how to go ahead and do the whole string alignment. The next step after this in their instructions is to go ahead and measure the distance between the front and the back on both sides of your horizontal tubes here. I'm not 100% sure how vital this part is, but our tubes were actually almost spot on. We just took our tape measure. It's a little hard if you're working by yourself, so I just taped the end to the front tube and then brought it to the back. We were just shy of 176 inches here. And then when I measured this side here, we were spot on at 176 inches. I think it was about 1/8 of an inch off. So I'm perfectly fine with leaving them like that, because at least the way I'm understanding the way this whole box alignment works in my head, I don't think it really matters too much if those distances are a little bit off. All right, now I almost got a little bit ahead of myself getting the strings set up, but before we start working on the toe adjustments, which the strings are for, you need to set the camber first. And then all I do is, this is where I use the camber plates. First I was using the little pegs, which I'm pretty sure is what's intended for measuring the camber. You get them lined up in the lip, top and bottom. But it's hard to hold the plate steady and get an accurate measurement. But then I did notice there are these rubber pads they put on there, and they line right up with the rim, and that was able to allow me to put the toe plate here and then take my digital angle finder here and then line it up with the plate. The rear isn't 1.5 or negative 1.5 degrees. It's just the way I'm kind of awkwardly holding this right now and trying to hold the camera at the same time. But just for fitment's sake, I shot for 2 degrees of negative camber in the rear. Now you can add camber bolts to the rear. I chose not to since we had the coilovers. So I pulled the rear seats out and we just adjusted the camber from the top of the coilovers themselves. It does bother my OCD a little bit because I had to move this one in 1 hash mark and this one on this side in 2 hash marks to get both sides at 2 degrees of camber, and I pretty much hit them spot on at exactly negative 2 degrees camber in the rear. And really that was for just giving the rears just a little bit more tuck at the top of the wheels. And then the front, I was kind of aiming for about negative 1.5 degrees, somewhere around there in the front. And then that's where I got frustrated, because initially I tried to square everything up using the factory camber bolts, but for some reason on this side I could not get any less
I couldn't get closer to 0 in that sense. It wanted to sit, the most I could get the wheel to come out was negative 1.3 degrees. And so being that was sort of the max positive camber I could get in terms of going from negative to positive was that negative 1.3. I came over to this side. I was going to adjust this side the same, but I couldn't get this any more negative than negative 0.8. So that was frustrating. I feel like maybe I was doing something wrong, but it's pretty basic stuff. But yeah, the most I could get was negative 0.8 on this side. So I left that side at the negative 1.3, and I just used the top of the air strut here on this side, the camber plate. We brought that in a little bit, so we're sitting at, depending on how steady I hold that camber plate, 1.3 to 1.4 degrees of negative camber in the front. That's where I want it for now. If I need to, I can make small adjustments to the camber without having to worry about it affecting the rest of the alignment too much. But as long as our camber now is square where we want it, we can move on to the toe adjustments. All right, so then we can go ahead and get our string set up. You just take one end of the string, you just tie a very basic loop in it, bring it to the rear, and you tie the provided weight onto the string. The only gripe I have with these is there's like a 90-degree drilled in it. You can see it goes through the top. And now I just messed with my string. We're gonna have to double check that in a minute. And then it goes through the side, and it was just really hard to string the thread through there. But overall, not a big deal. Personally, I like to do one loop of the string over the bar just to hold the tension a little bit better. You don't want a ton of tension on there, but a little bit of tension is nice. And then you want to go around. I opted for the provided steel rule that you can get with the kit if you want. And then you just go off of the center of all 4 axles, and you just want to make sure that those are relatively the same. Most importantly, making sure it's the same side to side, and then close, ideally exact front to rear. I couldn't quite get it exact without it touching the front wheels after kind of setting the rear end up. You can see kind of how much room I leave myself. It's a little bit easier the closer you can get that string to the lip of the wheel. But in the back, we were 9.5 centimeters off of the center of the axle. And in the front, we were just shy of 10 centimeters off of the axle, and then it's replicated on both sides. So the front's at just shy of 10 centimeters. The rear is just shy of, or just right on 9.5 centimeters. And then all we're gonna do from there on out is we're going to take our measurements. We're gonna go off of the lip to the string, front, rear, compare those. Right now, off the top of my head, I don't know. It's one of those things I have to look up, whether we're going for toe in or toe out and all those things. I've got it written down on my phone. I just got to pull them up. But that's what I'm going to be doing next, is just going through, measuring these, and then adjusting the toe adjustment points as needed to get the wheel in or out based on what we want. And I believe, I haven't looked yet, but I believe Caliper Garage also has a calculator where you can take your millimeter measurements, take the difference between the two, and then translate those into a degree amount for getting your degrees of positive or negative toe in both the front and the rear of the car. So I'm going to go ahead and tackle that now. So now we've got the toe alignment all set up. I just went ahead and drew myself a diagram just to kind of keep things straight, because you can kind of lose track of your orientation getting out from underneath the car and going back under again. I really didn't need to calculate the degrees, because in the end I ended up just going for 0 degrees of toe on all 4 corners. But initially on the front passenger side, we had 0.4 degrees toed out. On the front driver's side, we had 1.4 degrees toed out. On the rear driver's side, we had 1 degree toed out. And on the rear passenger side, we had 0.4 degrees toed in. So we went ahead and I tackled the front first. Very, very simple on the front. Simply just adjusted the tie rod end links, which got replaced when we did this white line roll center correction kit. Those adjustments were extremely straightforward. No issues there. Adjusted each one little by little, and then ended up with 0 degrees with our measurements exactly square on both sides, 9 millimeters off of the string, front and rear on both sides. Then we went to the rear end, and I started with this rear passenger side first. We got that one squared up. And then over here, using the factory toe alignment bolt in the subframe, With that maxed out, I still was pretty far off on this side, so we actually had to do the remaining toe adjustments off of the white line adjustable links here. And then you can see when I was all done, I picked up this marking glue. That's exactly what it's made for. You just put it over where a bolt or a nut meets a fixed point. You put it on there, it dries, and then if for some reason there should be any movement, obviously it'll break, and you'll see that breaking. You'll see, you know, the degree to which something moved. So we've got that on all 4 of the lateral links now. Just because I didn't use the locking kit that White Line suggests using, we were able to get this side squared up using the factory toe adjustment bolt. And like I said, this side just wasn't cutting it to get it where it needed to be. So we adjusted it off of the lateral links instead. And then with everything squared up in the rear, we were 11 millimeters off of the string on both sides, front and rear of the wheel face. And so then I just went ahead. Now I lifted the car up. All I did was I went through, because we did quite a bit of work over the winter, a lot of the suspension, you know, mainly the rear end, but even in the front end, a lot of components were removed and put back. Went through, just did a good nut and bolt check. Like I said, the necessary suspension points that needed to be torqued with the suspension under load, I already did that. But all of the little things that weren't done when I did those suspension points, just went through and double checked that everything was good and tight, and we are. And so really overall, I'm really satisfied with the process. This was something that I thought was going to be way more tedious when I came out here today to do. Really, it was way more straightforward than I was letting on in my head, kind of why I was putting this off for a little bit, I guess. But it's all done now. Really happy with the way it went together. Couldn't be happier purchasing this Caliper Garage string alignment kit that I went with. Like I said, this was somewhere in the range of I think like $75, somewhere around there, give or take. And I did go with the upgraded kit that I believe simply the upgrade just comes with the weights and the steel ruler. But yeah, like I explained before, a lot of the pre-built kits where the frames come to you more or less assembled and you don't have to do any work, those start around like $450, $500. And it's kind of sky's the limit after that. You can get super, super expensive ones. But for $75, I couldn't be happier with how this went together. I know that the vehicle is aligned properly. Numbers don't really lie. I guess your measurement methods could technically be off, but I'm confident that we've got a good quality alignment on there now, and I didn't have to pay $125 for the shop down the road to do it. And so with that, now all there is to do is get it on the ground and let it warm up, and I'm actually just going to head down the road. I'm just going to take it for a quick drive, cross my fingers and hope I don't get pulled over. But even if I just take it all the way down the road and back, that's probably like a 20-minute round trip if I just take it all the way down to the next intersection and come back. Maybe most, if not all, the monitors might be reset. I might try to just drive it around a little bit today to get those monitors reset because the inspection is up. Registration's also up on this, but in New York State, if your inspection's expired, you can't renew your registration until you've redone that inspection. So hopefully, yesterday was 4th of July. I don't know if the shop down the road for me is open today or not. I got to give them a call, and hopefully I might be able to make an appointment for next week and get this thing in and get it inspected, and then I can order my new registration. And then with all that, we can go ahead and spend a little time. I'll get some cameras set up in the car, hopefully get some good audio of the car too, and take you guys with me and just let you know my thoughts on getting all of this upgraded suspension components in there, how it feels, how it drives, how it performs, and everything like that. But that's all there is going to be for today. Just a quick outro here because I'm a mess. I'm sweaty. It's 1,000,000 degrees today. I'm going to go change my clothes real quick, hop in, like I said, take this for a drive. So as always, guys, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below. And if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.